So here we have our first homework set of simultaneous equations with two variables. Now looking at these, I can clearly see that I need to rearrange my first one. So remember that they need to be in the form of ax plus by equals c. So I want my x terms to be first, then my y terms, then my equals a number. So this bottom one here is like that already. It has something x plus something y equals something. 1x plus 3y equals 25. My top equation isn't like that, so I'm going to need to rearrange that. So in order to do that, I will do some manipulation with that first equation. So first things first, I want the 2x to be on the other side, so I'll do that by subtracting 2x from both sides. Subtract 2x there and subtract 2x there. Now 2x minus 2x is equal to 0. So I can rewrite that right hand side as 0. 2x minus 2x equals 0. Now I have y minus 2x equals 0 minus 1. Well, 0 minus 1 equals minus 1, or negative 1. So I can rewrite that part as simply negative 1. And remember that I wanted my negative 2x to be on the left hand side of the y. So I can rearrange this here and write it as negative 2x plus y. So I'll move the y over to this side plus y. And now I have that equation in the correct form. And this equation up here was already in the correct form, so I'm just going to write that down below and line them up so you can easily see where the values are coming from for filling out the matrix with. Okay, and let's fill out the matrix. So we have negative 2x plus 1y is equal to negative 1. That's the first equation, negative 2 plus 1 equals negative 1. Then we have 1x plus 3y is equal to 25. And now I've filled my matrix out, and now it's time for the elimination. So when we're doing it in matrix form, we call it Gaussian elimination. Now, when I'm doing this, my end goal is to have ones going down on a diagonal. So starting from this one here, going down in a diagonal that way, to all end up being ones. And the column to be numbers, so the far right column, the bit that represents our equals part, to be any number. So that will result in a number, and everything else to be zeros. So when we've just got the two variable questions, it's just these two here. So that there needs to be 0, and that there needs to be 0. The zeros are the part that I'll start with. So I pick one of these to make 0, and I'll work out how I'm going to do that by adding or subtracting the different rows together. So in this case, I'm going to start with this one here. Now it doesn't really matter which one I start with, I'll still end up with the correct answers. This one just looks a bit easier to me. So I'm going to start with row 2. And row 2 is I'm going to do something with row 2 and row 1 to make that point there 0. So the way I'm going to do that is to double that second row, so 2 lots of row 2. That will make that number there a 2. And then I'm going to add it to row 1. So if I've doubled it, it becomes 2, and I add it to row 1, it will become 0. So added to row 1. Row 2 becomes 2 lots of row 2 plus row 1. Now in this case, row 1's not going to change. I'm only doing something to row 2, so I can just write row 1 in as it is to start with. And I accidentally wrote that in incorrectly there. Let's go back. It is a negative 2 there. Cool. So my row 2 becomes double of row 2 added to row 1. So double 1 is 2, added to negative 2 becomes 0. Double 3 is 6. 6 added to 1 is 7. And 25 double 25 is 50, added to negative 1 is 49. Now at this point I can scale my second row down so that I end up with a 1 at this point. So I've got my 0 there, I just need to make that a 1 and then I'm finished with this row. So I can scale that down by a factor of 7. I can divide that 7 by 7 and it will give me 1. So row 2 becomes row 2 divided by 7. My row 1 stays the same still. I'm not doing anything with row 1 just yet. So that stays as negative 2, 1 and negative 1. My row 2 is being divided by 7. So 0 divided by 7 is still 0. 7 divided by 7 is 1. And 49 divided by 7 is 7. Now I'm finished with my second row. So I just need to be concentrating on row 1 now. So again, starting with getting the zeros all in place, I want to make this value here a 0. So I can do that, it looks pretty clear to me. If I subtract row 2 from row 1, then I'm going to end up with 0. So I've got my 1 here, if I subtract that 1 down there, that value will become 0. So row 1 becomes row 1 minus row 2. And my row 2 is staying the same this time, so I'll just fill those details in, 0, 1 and 7. And now I have negative 2, my row 1 minus row 2, negative 2 minus 0 is still negative 2, 1 minus 1 is 0, and negative 1 minus 7 is negative 8. And at this point, I've got my 0 in place, I just need to make this here a 1 and I'm finished with that row. So to make that 1, I can scale it down by a factor of negative 2. So if I divide negative 2 by negative 2, I'm going to end up with 1. So row 1 becomes row 1 divided by negative 2. So my row 2 still stays the same, 0, 1 and 7. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is 1. 0 divided by negative 2 is still 0, and negative 8 divided by negative 2 is 4. Now if you get a little bit caught out by some of these negatives, dividing by negatives, multiplying by negatives, that kind of thing, you can always use your calculator. You do have your calculators in this assessment, so you can check those things if you get caught out by them on your calculator. Now in this case, at this point in time, I can see a solution. I can see that when I have 1x and 0 y's, it's equal to 4. So 1x is equal to 4, x equals 4. And when I have 0 x's but 1 y, that is equal to 7. So 0 x's, 1 y, 7, 1 y is 7, y is equal to 7. And we call this solution unique because there is a solution. So we have other options where we can't find a solution. In this case, there is an exact value for what x is using these two equations and an exact value for what y is. So a unique solution. And that's all we need to do to solve one of these. This working out sheet will also be loaded onto the site, so you can have a read through that and work through it by yourself slowly if you like.